Human Capital Management program at Columbia University. So we want to thank you all this evening for joining us, and we look forward to having a great presentation. James, would you please introduce our speaker for this evening?
I'd be glad to, thanks. Background, so there's been numerous polls that have been taken asking alumni of a lot of universities, but I remember reading specifically some Ivy League school polls, what they felt was the most valuable part of their education. Obviously, the quality of the education itself ranked very highly, but what ranked higher than that, highest of all and consistently, was the quality of the network that they developed as being a part of that specific institution. So, these interviews tell us that the future benefit to your career in having access to that robust network of high-performing individuals is really immense. And the singular word they used over and over again was opportunity. Their network gave them the opportunity for personal development and career advancement that they felt they wouldn't have had otherwise. So based on this as being one of the most important things you can do to build and nurture your professional network, we're very, very lucky to have with us tonight Dr. Ivan Misner, one of the world's leading experts on business networking. I was lucky enough to get to meet Dr. Misner 2008, maybe 2009. He agreed to be interviewed for my first book. He is a fascinating man. He's the founder and chief visionary officer of the Business Network International, BNI. It's the world's largest business networking organization with over 9,700 chapters throughout pretty much every populated continent in the world. Last year alone, BNI generated almost 12.3 million referrals for its members, resulting in about $16.7 billion worth of business. He's been called the father of modern networking by both Forbes and CNN. He's a New York Times bestselling author, columnist for entrepreneur.com, university professor, and very well-known keynote speaker. So with that, thank you, Dr. Misner, for giving us your time, expertise, and benefit today.
Thanks, James. I appreciate that introduction. And you guys, please call me Ivan. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk to your alumni tonight. I'm really pleased to do that. I'm going to be talking about networking for success, and I'm going to cover a number of things that I will then open it up for questions. And the only dumb question is the unasked question. Whatever's on your mind is fine. I'm happy to answer questions about my content. If you have a personal question, I'm happy to talk about that. Whatever you'd like, I'm game. I'm happy to answer those questions. All right, so let's get started. Tonight, I'm going to talk about both the mindset and the skill set of networking. Now, when you talk to most networking experts, they're going to talk about skill set. Here are the skills that you need to have to network. But the truth is, if you want to really build a powerful personal network, you have to first start with the mindset before you get to the skill set. I'm going to cover both tonight. First, I want to talk about EQ, emotional quotient, emotional intelligence. You might get hired because you're smart, because you have a nice IQ, but you get promoted because of your EQ, your ability to interact effectively with other people. This is a really important thing to understand, and networking is part of that. You know, I did a survey and I was asked to mention some of the books as I go along. This survey came out of a book I wrote called Business Networking and Sex, Not What You Think. It's about the difference between men and women and how they network. And I did this survey of 12,000 people, and I asked them, has networking played a role in your success? Over 91% of the respondents said yes. When have you ever seen 91% of any group of people ever agree to anything? But they agreed, 91% said networking's played a role in their success, both men and women. What I have found, however, is that most colleges and universities view networking as a soft science, and they don't teach it. They'll teach leadership, but most don't really teach networking. And I wish more colleges would teach networking, and that's what I'm going to teach tonight, is a little bit about networking. And I'm so pleased that your school would, through this program, teach a little bit about networking. Let's start with the mindset topics. And I'm going to begin with a concept called the butterfly effect of networking, the butterfly effect of networking. Now, 13 years ago, I was sitting in the great room on this island, Necker Island. This is a picture of the great room in Necker Island. And in 2007, that was the only place you could really get the internet. And I was sitting there on the internet, and I had to write an article. At the time, I was writing I still write for Entrepreneur, but it was a piece for Entrepreneur, and the deadline was that day. And I'm sitting in the great room of Necker Island. Look at this island. Is that not beautiful? It's in the middle of the Caribbean, the Virgin Islands. And I'm sitting there, and you could see the Caribbean, 80% of the room, you were able to see the Caribbean. And I had to write this article, and I was stumped. I didn't know what I was going to write. Just stuck. And while I was sitting there, up walked Sir Richard Branson. Richard Branson, Virgin America, Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Telephone, Virgin Galactic, Virgin everything. And Richard Branson walks up and he says, "Hey, what are you doing?" So, "Well, I have a deadline for an article. I got to get it out in the next couple of hours." And he said, "Oh man, I get I get deadlines. But look, when you're done, come on down. We're all by the pool and by the ocean, and we're having fun. Come join us. And if I don't see you down there, sit next to me at dinner tonight. I'd like to learn more about this B&I, this networking thing that you do." And he walked away, and I sat there and I thought, dang, how did I get here? How did I get on this Caribbean island with a billionaire who walks on up and says, "Hey, what are you doing? Let's go out and play. If I don't see you, sit next to me in the lunchroom. Let's talk." How did I get here? And so what I decided to do on that day was I decided to reverse engineer how I got to that island. And that's when I wrote an article about the butterfly effect of networking. You can see that original article now on my blog at ivanmisner.com. Go back to 2007, you'll see the original blog, where I reverse engineered how I got there. And the interesting thing is that it took more than 2 years of building relationships with people. It started with a request from a solopreneur life coach, not a big wig who introduced me to somebody who introduced me to somebody, but no, it was a solopreneur life coach who introduced me to somebody, who introduced me to someone else, who introduced me to someone else, who introduced me to someone else, that got me on Necker. And that's what the butterfly effect is. Butterfly effect is part of chaos theory, which is in the Department of Mathematics, which says that the flapping of the wings of a butterfly in one place changes something, which changes something, which changes something, which changes something, which changes the weather. And I believe that applies to networking as well. That when you meet one person, if you make a good connection with them, that leads to another relationship, which leads to another relationship, which leads to another relationship. And this is really important in networking. If you don't get this, you are constantly out there hunting for business, for connections, for the right people. And I believe that networking is more about farming than it is about hunting. It's about cultivating relationships with other business professionals. The butterfly effect is the first of the mindset things that I want to talk about today. I have had a chance to go back to Necker Island now on 3 occasions. The last one being right before COVID hit. It was in January. I went back to Necker Island and spent a fair amount of time with Richard. Go to my blog at ivanmisner.com and go back to January. I did a video with him. Amazing individual. And this happened because I was willing to connect with somebody who I didn't think could really make a difference for me personally. There's nothing they could do particularly to help me, but they were good at what they did. And I made that connection because they were good at what they did. And they introduced me to someone who introduced me to someone who introduced me to someone. This is such a powerful technique because you never really understand the ripples that take place in relationships. And when you build good relationships with people, you follow those ripples over time. The problem, I think, with networking is a concept that I call the networking disconnect. People use networking as a face-to-face cold calling opportunity. Hi, my name's Ivan. Let's do business. Let's connect. What can you do for me? And that's the wrong way to use networking. I did a presentation in London many years ago. I was the keynote speaker. There were about 900 people. It was an all-day event. There was a lot of networking going on. And when it came time for me to speak, I started by asking the audience 2 questions. The first question was, how many of you are here today hoping to, maybe possibly sell something? Now, you have to recognize this was a convention for sales, for marketing, for business. I asked them, how many of you are here to hopefully sell something? 900 people raised their hands. I mean, everybody in that room raised their hands. I said, great, second question. How many of you are here today hoping to, maybe just possibly buy something? No one raised their hands. Not one single person. This is what I call the networking disconnect. People go to networking meetings to get something, but they're not necessarily there to help or to learn. They're there to sell something, but not to buy something. That's a mistake. Most people use networking as a face-to-face cold calling opportunity. That is also a mistake. So people say to me, well, Ivan, why in the world would you go to a networking event if it's not to make that big connection, make that big sale, get that job interview? And the answer to that question lies within this concept. And that is understanding what I call the VCP process. The VCP process: visibility, credibility, profitability. This is the most powerful concept in networking that I teach. It is absolutely critical. And if you want to build a powerful personal network, you really need to understand the VCP process. First, you have to be visible in the community. People have to know who you are and what you do. Then you have to move to credibility, where people know who you are, they know what you do, they know you're good at it. And then and only then can you get to profitability, where people know who you are, they know what you do, and they know you're good at it, and they're willing to refer business to you or help you or refer you to a job opportunity because they know you're so good at what you do. And the truth is, you have to move through that process. You go from visibility to credibility to profitability. That's why you network. That's why you network, is to move through that relationship process. And if you don't get this, you use networking as a face-to-face cold calling opportunity. And I'm here to tell you that's a mistake. It's a huge, huge mistake. So in terms of the mindset of networking, we've talked about the butterfly effect of networking, and we've talked about VCP. That's the mindset. Those are the things that you need to think about in order to go into this process doing it right. But there's a lot more. Now, the truth is, I could spend hours talking about the skill set, but I've got about another 15 or 20 minutes. So let me cover some of the skill set aspects of building a powerful personal network. I'm only going to give you a handful, but this will help you get rolling. The first is that I think that most business people are by nature cave dwellers. They get up in the morning, they're in this large cave with a big screen television. Before COVID, we would get into this little cave with 4 wheels called our car. We would drive to this other really big cave with computers called our office. We'd stay there all day long, and at the end of the day, we'd get back into our little cave with 4 wheels. We'd drive back to the large cave with the big screen TV. And we didn't know why people weren't referring us or helping us. Well, the truth is that networking is a contact sport. You have got to get belly to belly with people, whether it's virtually through Zoom or through some online platform right now. By the way, I don't believe in social distancing. I think it is physical distancing. We need to be physically distant right now, but not socially distant. We need to be more social than ever. So this whole concept that I'm talking about comes out of a couple of my books, including the 29% Solution. So if you're interested, take a look at that. But it really is a contact sport. You got to get out and connect with people, whether it be virtually, one-to-one, or in person after all of COVID is past us. That's what networking is about, is connecting with people. Now, there are, I believe, 4 streams of a network, 4 streams of a network. I talk about this in a book I wrote called Networking Like a Pro. If you were going to start with any one of my books, I would start with this one, Networking Like a Pro. There are 4 different types, at least 4 different types of networks that I think you should engage in when you graduate from college. These are the 4 casual contact networks, like a chamber of commerce, knowledge networks, like networks that involve your professional association. If you're an attorney, it's the American Bar Association. If you're a real estate agent, it's the local Realtors Association. Every business has an association. You want to be part of a knowledge network. Strong contact networks. Strong contact networks are networks that usually get together on a regular basis, and their focus is on passing each other referrals. They are organizations like BNI, the one I started. BNI is a strong contact network. And of course, online networks. I think online networks are really important. Networks like LinkedIn. I'm a fan of LinkedIn. I don't believe that in-person and online are competitive. I think it's not either or, it's both and, that you want to belong to both organizations that meet in person, after COVID, of course, and organizations that meet online. So these are the 4 streams. I would recommend, and it often surprises people to hear the founder of BNI say, go join other networks. But the truth is, if you want to build a powerful personal network, and I'm assuming most of you are here because you want to participate, you want to build a powerful personal network. The truth is, you need to participate in more than one kind of network. This, an alumni association is a network. That's one. But the local chamber is one. A BNI group is one. LinkedIn is one. You need to participate in 2 or 3 of those kinds of networks if you really want to build a powerful personal network. Now, let's say when this craziness is over, many people call it lockdown, quarantine. I don't like those terms. I think mindset is very important. I like to call this period of our life the great pause. The pause button has been hit on our life, and there's a bit of a pause on how we operate. But when the pause button is released and the play button is hit and you're actually meeting people in person, let me give you a couple of ideas on what to do. When you meet individuals, you walk into a big room, there's a lot of people, and you go, I don't even know where to start. This is particularly true with introverts who they're overwhelmed. And so let me give you an idea that will help you when you walk into a large room with many, many people. The first thing you want to look for are closed 2s and closed 3s. These are groups of people that are standing, face to face, and it's impossible to kind of break in easily and start a conversation. Avoid them. Unless there's someone in that group and it's easy to connect. Otherwise, avoid them. What you want to look for in a networking environment are open 2s and open 3s. These are groups of people that are standing like in a V or in a U, where it's very easy to come up and start a conversation with them. What I'm talking about here is very simple, but it's not easy. It's not easy because when you get into networking environments and you're meeting somebody you already know, you go right into that closed 2 and you start this conversation and you forget that there are many other people around you. So when you run in-person alumni meetings, remember this. I'm happy to give you guys this slide. It's out of the book, Networking Like a Pro. Remember this. When you do alumni meetings, always stand in open 2s, open 3s, or open groups, because it makes it feel very inclusive for people to step in and talk to you. this is really important so that when you walk into a room, you see open twos, like in the bottom left in the top right where there's an open three. You see those closed groups, the middle four and below the middle lower three. You know, it's hard to break into those, but it's very easy to connect into the open twos and open threes. So this is one of those techniques that's simple but not easy. It's not easy because you forget. And if you can remember this, particularly, you know, when you start having alumni meetings and you're talking to one another in your meeting, remember this open two. And I would recommend you open up that meeting by talking about this to make it inclusive so people can step in and talk to you. Okay. Let's talk for a few minutes about a concept that I call the 24/7/30 follow-up system. You know, in networking, people are always asking me, how do you follow up? What are the things that you need to do to follow up? And I'm going to open this up in about 10 minutes for Q&A. But there's a few other things I want to talk about, and this is one of them, the 24/7/30 follow-up system. If you do this, you will learn how to follow up effectively with the people you actually meet, whether it's a Zoom meeting or whether it's an in-person meeting. It's a great technique. This originally came from a book I wrote called The Networking Disconnect. Your leadership group asked me to mention books as I went along, and this came out of the book, The Networking Disconnect. So let's talk about this for a while. Here's the concept. Within 24 hours, you want to reach out and connect with somebody that you've met. So let's say you go to a business event, you meet them, you collect their cards, and you follow up with them. My advice is that you follow up with them. Honestly, I think a handwritten note is amazing. Nobody does snail mail anymore. But if you don't like to do that, you know, an email is fine. You follow up with somebody and you just simply say, hey, it was great meeting you at the such and such event. I hope our paths cross again. I enjoyed our conversation on X. And don't ask them for anything. Don't try to sell them anything. Don't try to promote anything. Don't ask them for anything. This is counterintuitive. I know that. You know the old expression, it never hurts to ask? That's a lie. It does hurt to ask. When you ask people for something before you have a relationship, it sours the relationship. First, you have to have the relationship. Social capital is like financial capital. Banks have this crazy idea that you actually have to put money in the bank before you write a check. Well, social capital is not very different than that. You should invest in the relationship before you ask for withdrawal. So within 24 hours, you connect with them and you tell them that it was nice to meet them. You hope their paths cross again. Don't sell them. Don't ask for something. Within 7 days, you want to connect with them on social media. Now, this is a little longer piece. The key here is you connect with them where they want to be, not where you want to be. And I learned this from my children. My eldest daughter is now 34, but when she was 17, I would call her on my phone to her phone, and she would not answer. And I was like, what's going on? So I would text her, and she'd respond immediately. And I remember talking to her, and I was like, honey, you know this is like a phone. You can listen here, you can talk there, you can have a conversation. She's like, oh, Dad. She actually said to me when she was 17, she said, Dad, you're not only not with it, you're not even near it. She really said that. So I was like, okay, if I want to talk to my daughter, I have to text her. So I learned to text her if I wanted to communicate with her. Now, my next daughter, a few years younger, if I called her, nothing. If I texted her, nothing. Now, she's now 28. So this was a number of years ago. And I said to my wife, what do I do to connect with Dorian? She's not responding. And my wife said, oh, well, you have to WhatsApp her. Now, this is a number of years ago. And I was like, what's WhatsApp? I don't know what that is. And so, you know, I downloaded WhatsApp so I could talk to my second daughter. Because if I called her, nothing. If I texted her, nothing. But if I WhatsApped, messaged her, boom, she'd respond. Now, I'll tell you how this fits with networking in a moment. My son, my youngest, he's now 26. I knew if I called him, he wouldn't respond. I knew if he texted, he wouldn't respond. He didn't like WhatsApp, but he was a gamer. I knew he was a gamer. And he loved games on Steam, which is an online platform. And Steam has an instant messaging feature. So I was in my 50s. I downloaded a game. I bought a game so that I could instant message my son and say, hey, buddy, how you doing? What's going on? And I would instant message him. If I called him, nothing. If I texted him, nothing. He wasn't even on WhatsApp. That was old school. But if I instant messaged him on Steam, he'd respond immediately. What does this have to do with networking? Doesn't matter where you like to hang out. Doesn't matter. You like LinkedIn? Great. You like Facebook? Great. Instagram? Super. Doesn't matter. What matters is, where does the person that you want to build a relationship hang out? Do they hang out on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, WhatsApp, wherever it is? Where are they? If that's where they hang out, that's where you want to hang out with them. You want to connect with them where they are. And so if it's, for example, Facebook, my biggest following is on Facebook. I have a public page there, about 160,000 followers. You can connect with me on Facebook. And what you want to do is connect with somebody on their social media and interact, you know, respond to their posts, make comments, engage with them, and do that all within 7 days after you meet them. So within 24 hours, say, hey, it was great to meet you. Within 7 days, you connect with them on their social media platform. And then within 30 days, you ask to do a one-to-one. This is the follow-up process that will work for you. You ask to do a one-to-one. Now, today it might be a Zoom one-to-one where you're connecting with them online, but generally the best scenario is to do an in-person one-to-one, and sit down. And when you reach out to them, say, look, I don't want to sell anything to you. I'm not going to ask you for anything. My goal is to build my network. And I want to know more people, and I want to build relationships with more people. And that's why I just want to connect with you. And most people will say, okay, fine, let's meet. And they'll do it. And then learn about them. And whatever you do on the social media, don't sell to them. When you meet with them that one-to-one, don't sell to them. Don't necessarily ask them for anything. You got to build the relationship with someone. Now, a lot of you are probably reasonably young and you're thinking, man, I have not built a really big network. It's okay. It's okay. When I was in my 20s, I certainly hadn't had a really big network. There's this great saying that I love. It's, when's the best time to plant an oak tree? And the answer is 20 years ago. And then it goes on to say, well, when's the second best time? And the second best time is today. So let's say you haven't built the kind of network that you really want. Today's the next best time. And so the techniques that I have given you are techniques that will help you build a powerful personal network by having the right mindset of VCP and of the butterfly effect of networking, to understand that networking is really more about farming than it is about hunting, that you got to go out and connect with a lot of people, the 24/7/30. These are all the kinds of things that you need to do. I've met many, many people over the years that, they think they have a particular perception of their skills of networking, but the truth is that we may not be giving the impression that we think, that we might think we're really good at networking, but we might not be as good at networking as we believe. And I have found that most people who think they're good at networking are extroverts. Ironically, introverts don't, but the truth is introverts, I think, have an advantage, because what I have learned is that networkers, really good networkers, have 2 ears and 1 mouth and use them both proportionally. Extroverts love to talk. And what's their favorite subject? Themselves. And that doesn't necessarily make a great networker. So extroverts have to learn how to shut up and listen. Introverts have a hard time meeting people. They got to learn how to meet people, but they're better at listening. And so you can be an introvert or an extrovert, and you can be great at networking. You just have to learn some of the key techniques in order to do that. And I have simply scratched the surface of what it takes to build a powerful personal network. If you're interested in following me, you can follow me at facebook.com/IvanMisner.BNI founder. And of course, I'm the founder of BNI, so you can go to BNI.com. A lot of great BNI groups all over the world. We have 9,700 all over the world to help people build their business through referrals. So with that, let me open it up for any questions that you might have. And I'll repeat, the only dumb question is the unasked question. I'm happy to answer any question about the stuff I talked about tonight. Anything else you have, I'm happy to take personal questions, whatever's on your mind. So Thalia, let me turn it over to you, and I'm going to stop sharing so my screen maybe is a little bigger.
Thank you, Dr. Misner, for your time and for your great presentation. As we move into the Q&A component of this evening, we look forward to hearing your questions. Jane Zelenko, the VP of the Human Capital Management Club, will be reviewing the chat and asking Dr. Misner your questions. So please enter any questions you may have into the chat button as we move along this evening, and we look forward to having a very active discussion. Jane?
Thank you, Thalia, and thank you, Ivan. That was definitely an insightful presentation. Thank you for leaving us with, at least 3 tangible things we can start doing and using.
At least 3, yes.
Well, you gave us more than that, but I was taking some diligent notes, as I'm sure were many others. Okay, and so to be respectful of your and everybody else's time, I'm going to hop into some of the questions we had pre-sent to us, and then I'm going to start going through the chat. Attendees, if we miss a question of yours, don't worry, we're probably going to get to it. And if not, we will have some follow-up with more questions answered. So don't worry, we will get to yours. First question is, it comes from our leadership team, and it is, how much time should you devote to each stream or channel of networking per week to reach like a minimum threshold?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I actually have a good answer, hard data. And not necessarily on each stream, but the total amount of time that you should spend. That the one survey I showed that 91% of people said that networking has played a role in their success. We asked them, how much time do you spend networking? And we found that on average, people spent 6.3 hours a week networking. So let's just say 6.5 hours a week on their networking efforts. Now, networking, it means going to networking meetings, but it also means doing one-to-ones. It means, writing thank you cards to people for something they did. Networking is much broader than just going to a networking meeting or a social event. But, there's many more things, but you should spend 6.5. Now, here's the thing I always say. How many of you watching this want to be average? Most people would like to be above average. So if you want to be average, the average was about 6.5 hours a week. What we found was that there was a direct and dramatic linear correlation between the amount of time people spent networking and the amount of business they generated from their networking. And so the more time you spend, the more networking, the more opportunities there are. I believe that at least 8 hours a week is really what you should be shooting for, to spend time in those streams of your network to make the kind of connections that you want. Great question, by the way, whoever asked that.
Hey, got it. Aiming for above average. So we're going to take that as a minimum of 8, not a minimum of 6.5. All right.
You're from Columbia. You got to be above average.
Next one comes from Miriam. She'd like to know a little bit more about the butterfly effect and maybe some experiences that you've had with perhaps how minorities or folks in certain affiliate groups may not necessarily experience the same effects. And also, she asked also about introverts, though you did address that partially already.
Yeah, so let's talk about the diversity issue, because I think that's a really important one, obviously very important right now. But I've been talking about this for more than 10 years. I wrote an article on entrepreneur.com. You can find the article by going to entrepreneur.com and looking for my name, doing a search on my name, and on Brian Hilliard. Brian and I co-authored the article. You can also find it on my blog at ivanmisner.com. So do a search on diversity. Let's talk about that one first, because I think it's really important. And I've been talking about this for 10 years. Networks are by nature clumpy. That's the technical term. They're cluster-like. People tend to hang out with people like themselves. That's not good. Not to build a powerful personal network. What you want is a network with some people in it that are different than you, different ethnicity, different age, different socioeconomic background, different education. Because the truth is, the more diverse your network, the more you have connections, people who are connectors to other clumps, to other clusters of people. So if you have a diverse network, you have a lot of people who are connectors to other clusters of networks. And so diversity is just good business. It's smart business. It's not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do in business. And I've been talking about this for 10 years. So let me give you, we wrote about in that article and on my blog, 7 things that you can do to diversify your network. The first is to recognize that diversity is a process, not a program. It's not a program, it's a process. It's something you've got to commit to continuously. Second is really simple. Get your phone, open it up, take a look at it. What do your contacts look like? Are they all like you? Do they look like you? Are they your age? Look at your social media. Are they basically you? Or do they represent society? And if they're basically you, then you got to go back to number 1 and recognize that diversity is a process and you need to begin the process. And this is a great place to begin, is to take a look at your contacts and figure out, is this, do I have diverse relationships? Number 3, consider volunteering for organizations which put you in contact with people who are different than you. Volunteer for organizations where you will be in contact with the people that are different than you. 4, make a point of talking to people who don't look like you. You're a young person, have a conversation with an old guy like me with gray hair. If you're a Caucasian, talk to African Americans. If you're and this idea actually comes from my co-author, Brian Hilliard, who's African American. And he says he lives in a very white neighborhood. And he said, I go out of my way to always talk to people who don't look like me so that they know that there are people that don't look like them that are okay to talk to. I know that sounds crazy, but it's his concept and I love it. I think it's brilliant. I recommend it. Make a point to talk to people who don't look like you. Number 5, invite people of different ethnicities to whatever networking group you belong to. So if you're in the Alumni Association, invite people who don't look like you to the association. That's a way you create diversity. Next is make this a top-down initiative wherever you are in your organization. You don't have to be CEO to do it. You don't have to be president of the university to do it. Wherever you are in the university, it needs to be top down from there. Forget about everybody else. Make sure it happens from there. And last, hard code diversity into the fabric of your business. If you're able to integrate that into your core values as an organization, that's great. If you can integrate it into the core values, your personal core values, that's fantastic. So those are some of the key elements of, I think, integrating diversity. And the truth is, and I talk about this in the article, that you may be very open-minded, but if you're not intentional, doesn't come together. You can say, hey, we're open to anybody. But if you're not intentional about creating that diversity, you don't achieve that diversity. Diversity, intentionality is your goal. Diversity is a fact. And so the question you have to ask is, does my intention match the fact? And if it doesn't, then you need to up your intention. Now, that was the first part. The second part was about being an introvert versus an extrovert. I would recommend you go to my blog, ivanmisner.com, and do a search on OMG, I'm an introvert. And it was where I learned I was an introvert, not an extrovert. I was an introvert who's a situational extrovert, that when I'm talking about my subject, I come across as an extrovert. Otherwise, I'm basically an introvert. And I didn't know that until I took this test. And so go to ivanmisner.com, do a search on OMG, and I'm an introvert. And I'm here to tell you, introverts can be just as good at networking as extroverts. I think I'm reasonably good at this, and it turns out I'm an introvert. Great questions.
Thank you. We've got so many more coming, so I will keep on this topic. Okay, so the next question actually comes from, we probably got this asked like 5 or 6 times. It's about the challenge somebody might face when approaching someone that is more professionally senior or more well-developed in terms of their career. Is this an issue? How do people view it? What advice might you have in that arena?
Okay, so again, I'd recommend you go to my blog, look for an article, a blog I did called Networking Up. And it's about networking above your weight class, you know, people that you feel are more successful than you. I talk about a lot of things there. I think it may be a video actually. And so one of the things I say in there is, again, don't try to sell to them. Your inclination is to ask them for a favor, ask them for a job, you know, ask them for a business. And you got to stop yourself from doing that, because the truth is everybody's doing that. Everybody's doing that to this person. If they're really successful, everybody and their mother's asking them for stuff. Don't be like everyone else. Instead, what you want to do is find out what they're interested in. And I talk at length about this. You know, this is like a 20-minute conversation. I'll give it to you brief. You got to find out what they're interested in. And you have to find out if there's any way you can help them with that. If there's any way you can help them. Now go to my blog and look back in January. I did a video. I'll give you a real quick story. When I went to Necker Island, I talked about Necker. Every time I've gone to Necker, particularly the second time I went, I wanted to do a video with Richard, with Branson. But I didn't want to go to him and say, hey, Richard, would you do a video with me on my blog? You know, I didn't want to do that, because I recognized that everybody's asking him for favors. So instead, what I did was I talked to him about something I knew he was interested in. Now, last January, he had just come out with a book. I think it was Losing Your Virginity, about virgin. And so I said, tell me about your book. And he lit up. And I said to him, I wanted to do a video with him for my blog. And I said to him, how can I help promote your book? And he said, I don't know, you know, tell your network. I said, would you like to do a video? So and I'll put it out to my network. He said, yeah, that would be great. And so you go to my blog, ivanmisner.com, go back to January. You'll see a video that I did with Richard. I was networking up. I'm not a billionaire. I'm closer in, trust me, Jane, I'm closer in net worth to you than I am to Richard in terms of wealth. And so I was networking up. So I looked for an opportunity to help him, to do something that benefited him. And at the same time, it certainly benefited me. And so that's what you do when you're networking up. Find that article, and that'll help you. I see a question here that I'd like to jump in and ask, if you don't mind. It was about Granovetter. I'm not sure that's spelled right, but the idea of the strength of weak ties. And I think it comes from Solange. Can you talk about the power of weak networks? Granovetter's materials on the strength of weak ties. And I have a strong opinion on that. The thing that you have to remember about that article or about that research is it was about looking for a job. And so when it comes to looking for a job, weak ties can be very strong. When it comes for referrals for business, weak ties are not as strong. And I've done research on this and determined that that's the case. It was a part of a master's thesis that someone did with me, where Granovetter's research is absolutely accurate when it comes to looking for work, but it's not accurate when it comes to looking for referrals to get a sale or business. So interesting question. I'm rarely asked that one. That's a great question. And I appreciate it. So thanks. Jane, what else would you like me to answer?
I have actually a follow-up off of that question, which is, then how would you leverage that knowledge that there is a difference between creating and leveraging your network to gain business or sales versus looking for a job, which may be what a number of our current students, some alumni, and a lot of other attendees watching may be doing at some point in the future. How do you then, how would you say you leverage the weak ties in this situation?
Well, weak ties can, you know, if you're looking for the word, if you're looking for a job, the weak ties can be reasonably good, but you go to your strong ties first and maybe ask for a connection to somebody else. Well, let me refer you to so-and-so. I think they know someone there. And so if you have that connection where if I said to someone, hey, look, I know Jane, she knows me really well. If you referred me to somebody and if you referred me to James and because you know me and James knows you, James might be a weak tie. You're my strong tie, but James might go, oh, well, if you know Jane, then yeah, I'm happy to recommend you for an interview at such and such place. And that's where the strength of weak ties comes in. But it's the ties can become even stronger when there's some kind of strong connection related to it. On the other hand, when you want somebody to buy a product or service from you, weak ties are not very good because people don't want to, they just don't recommend somebody that they don't trust. When it comes to, you know, buying something, you got to know, like, and trust the person. You got to be at that VCP. You got to be at that credibility phase before you can get to profitability. Does that answer the question?
I think so, yes. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like we do have some time for some more questions, and I've got quite a few here. So the next one is, what's the best way to reach out to an old connection who perhaps you have not connected with and don't have much of a relationship with anymore?
Great question. And I would again start with, don't reach out to them and say you want to sell them something. I've had so many people who say, hey, Ivan, how you doing? Long time since we've talked. It's great to be able to connect with you. Oh, hey, I'm in a new business. Would you like to buy? And I'm like, really? Seriously? No, no, don't do that. So you want to, I think it's great to connect with people that maybe that you've been out of touch with for a long time. Benign neglect is a horrible thing. You know, benign neglect, when you neglect relationships, they just gradually over time dissipate. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you're like, gee, I wish I would have stayed in touch with that person, it's okay to then say, all right, let me reconnect. And then just reconnect. Be honest, be direct. Say, it's been a long time since we talked. How are you doing? What's new? What's going on? And have some conversations before you ever ask anything from them. That's a big mistake.
That definitely resonates.
Yeah,
All right.
and it resonates, it certainly resonates for me on LinkedIn. People will connect with me on LinkedIn. Hey, I'd like to network with you and learn more about, what you do. And I connect with them. And then their next message is, hey, thank you so much for that connection. I have this product. I would love to sell it to you. I'm like, seriously, dude, what's wrong with you? No, I don't know you. I'm not going to buy your product.
Okay. The next question comes from Bryce, and it's about the ideal times to connect. Are there best times of the week or day or even month at which to reach out to someone and make a connection?
Yeah, but it kind of depends on who you're talking to. There are some people that, if it's a business connection, usually during the work week is when you want to connect with them. During work hours is when you want to connect with them. If it's a personal friend or an associate that you know personally, it probably doesn't have to be during the work week. It may not have to be during normal work hours. Depends on who you want to connect with. I mean, I think back to I was talking about the 24/7/30 and my 3 kids. If I want to talk to my son, I don't talk to him at 9 a.m. That's just not going to happen. He's a game programmer. If I want to talk to him at 11 p.m., yeah, that's no big deal. He's up till 2 or 3 a.m. But, if I were to talk to him at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, he's out, he's asleep. So you got to know the person a little bit. You got to know the context. You have to have what Warren, I got my doctoral degree at USC, and I studied under Warren Bennis, who was in his day the world's leading expert in leadership. And one of the things I learned from him was this idea of contextual intelligence, that one must understand the context of the issue before one makes a decision or tries to do something. So you have to have contextual intelligence. You got to know a little bit about the person to know when the best time to connect with them is. And if you don't know that, you connect with them at a time that seems obvious, but doesn't work. Does that make sense?
That definitely makes sense. I'm now realizing that I'm definitely a person who likes emails in the morning, and a lot of my colleagues do not.
There you go. So everybody watching this, if you want to connect with Jane, connect with her in the morning.
All right. Our next question comes from Tine, and the question is, what characteristics can extroverts focus on exhibiting or leveraging when they are networking? To be mindful, obviously, that they're different from introverts and like to talk about themselves.
So that's a great question. And I'm usually asked about the introverts, not the extroverts. So I love this. So here's the deal, extrovert, don't get offended. Here's what you got to do. Shut up. Listen. Ask questions. I think a great networker is like an interviewer. I do a lot of radio shows. Media interviews. I've done 5 or 6 this week. A great interviewer asks me questions and allows me to elaborate. So extroverts, learn how to ask questions and then shut up and listen and find out more about the person. It's important, I think, to be more interested than interesting when you meet people. That's really important. And extroverts, they struggle with that. And so the more you can do that effectively, the better an extrovert can be at networking. And they can be outstanding at networking. There's no doubt about it, but they got to develop that skill. By the way, I talk about the kinds of questions you can ask people in the 29% Solution, 52 weekly networking success strategies. It's one of the books I wrote on networking. And I have a whole list of questions in that book that you can ask when you're in a networking environment.
Just jotting that down. Okay, the next question is, has there been any change in your research to the 24/7/30 rule as we've, over the past year, really translated to a virtual timeline? Is that changing how fast people respond? Is that changing how much people are getting contacted?
Well, maybe they're getting contacted more, but no, I would stick to the 24/7/30. Now, you have to understand, I've been impacted by this change, just like everyone else. I mean, when you think about it, BNI is a referral organization. We have 9,700 groups that met in person every week. Visualize that. 9,700 weekly meetings in person. We had to pivot on a dime to go to online. So I have been impacted as much as anyone. In my experience is that people are people, and if you can do certain things consistently, those things will work effectively. And so the 24/7/30, I think, is still quite effective. Now, how you network online may be slightly different. For example, it's very easy to be distracted. You know, if we had pictures of everybody that is on this Zoom call right now, you're going to see pictures of people going, you're going to see pictures of people sitting there like, yeah, I mean, you know, they're not engaged. And so that's one of the challenges with Zoom, is staying engaged. It's very important, particularly if you're just doing a one-to-one with somebody, that you be engaged with that. That's one of the big challenges, I think, with this two-dimensional kind of approach. But look, it's inevitable. It's inevitable. I wrote an article, you know, I think I mentioned this earlier 2 years ago, about the fact that I think that online networking was here to come. It was inevitable because of the technology. And so you just have to learn how to behave differently in the different environment. But one other thing, I am thankful that this happened in 2020 and not in 1985 when I started BNI. We didn't have the internet. Forget about a webinar where you could see people. That was unheard of. And so the fact that it's happening now instead of 35 years ago is a godsend for everyone, because we can still do business. You know, in this craziness, BNI has passed over $10 billion in business during COVID. And we've been able to do it because of this online ability. So yeah, it's a problem, it's a challenge, but we're in a better place than we would have been 10, 15, 20 years ago.
And definitely the contextual intelligence there is,
yeah,
well, I guess, bloom where you're planted, right? Like take advantage of the situation and the tools we have now.
Yep.
Okay. Ivan, do you have time for maybe 2 more questions?
Absolutely. I seem to have the sun coming in on me here, but I'm trying to dodge the sun. But yeah, I'm happy to take any questions you've got.
It looks like it's golden hour for you.
It's beautiful. You know what? I'll tell you what it is. It's wine o'clock. My wife and I, every night, you know, around 6 o'clock, unless I got something like this, we go up to, I have a tower up here in my house, and we go up there and we have a great glass of Cabernet Sauvignon and wine o'clock.
That's going to be my to-do after this. All right, next one. What are some of the most useful lessons learned in your experience? And I'm going to add one more question to this, which is, what are some faux pas that you've seen, or some disasters that you've seen that people might not even think of?
So let's come back to the disasters in a moment. Let's start with the things, the most important things. Was that the first one? So here's one that I think is really important with entrepreneurs, with business people, is you want to be successful at whatever it is that you do in life. Do 6 things 1,000 times, not 1,000 things 6 times. I see so many business people that are constantly doing 1,000 things 6 times. They're constantly chasing bright, shiny objects. Oh, let's try this. That might work. Oh, no, wait, let's try this. That might work. And they're bouncing around trying all these different things instead of doing a handful of things. It doesn't have to be 6. It could be 5. It could be 7. But you do, you know, a handful of things. You do 6 things 1,000 times. That's what creates success. If I have any superpower as an entrepreneur, it is that I am a dog with a bone. I am so persistent on something, and I will take ideas and do them 1,000 times. Now, what 6 things do you pick? Go to mentors, people you trust, people you respect, people you know, but also people that, you know, today virtual mentors are easier to obtain than ever. YouTube, podcasts. You know, when I was young, it was just books. But today it's, you know, there's so many places where you can find virtual mentors. Events like this, where you come and you watch and you learn something. You take those ideas from your mentors and you apply them to your life, and then you do 6 things 1,000 times. I'll give you one more, and then we can talk about faux pas. I think it's really important that whatever you do, that you work in your flame and not your wax. Work in your flame and not your wax. Still trying to dodge this thing. By in your flame, I mean, you do the things you're excited about, the things that you're passionate about. That's what you want to do. When you're working in your flame, you love what you do, you're excited about what you do. When you're working in your wax, it takes all your energy away. And so do what you're passionate about. Now, you know, young people in particular, sometimes we take jobs when we're young because we need the money. I get that. I get that. And sometimes you got to do what you got to do to get to do what you want to do. But always keep in mind what you want to do and strive to accomplish that. I have a daughter right now who so much wants to do one thing in particular, but she realizes that she's not ready for that. It's beyond her grasp. And I'm so proud of her because she's doing something that she likes, but she doesn't love. She likes it, but it'll make her money. That'll enable her to do what she's passionate about. And I'm really proud of her. And that's what you want to do, particularly when you're young. Figure out what's your passion, work towards that. You might not be there now, but continually keep that, you know, keep your eye on the ball and work towards that. That's really important. Work in your flame as soon as you can and not in your wax. Okay. You want to talk about faux pas? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, when it comes to networking, I think the biggest faux pas is, in one of my books, I called it premature solicitation, which you don't want to say fast 3 times, it'll get you in a lot of trouble. Where, you know, it's like you meet somebody and you're trying to sell to them already. And that's a giant mistake. It's that networking disconnect thing that I talk about, where, you want to sell, but you're not there to buy. I think that's one of the biggest faux pas. Abusing the relationship. You've got a connection with somebody and you're asking for stuff that is beyond the relationship you have. I think that's another really big faux pas. So, I mean, there's a couple. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that, you know, everyone is definitely being mindful, especially now, of how often they reach out to people. And sort of in the same vein, a question or a set of questions that we have is about the cadence at which to connect with someone. You know, right about now, how often would you say you want to be connecting with people for them to be active connections?
Here, I'm gonna put this up so that I don't have this.
You have a solution at the ready.
I have a solution while we're talking, so it's not quite so bright in my face. I don't know. There we go. It's a little bit better.
Well defined.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry. Give me the question again.
Yeah, of course. The question was about cadence and content, but I think I'm just trying to meld a couple of them together. It's really about how often should we be connecting with someone once we've done the 24/7 30 to keep them in active connection.
So touch points are really important. And I would urge people to, you know, have these touch points, make connections, connect with people. You know, it depends on how close you are. It depends on where you are in the VCP process: visibility, credibility, profitability. If you're at profitability with somebody, you should be connecting with them every couple of weeks, because these are people that are helping you dramatically. If you're at credibility, I would recommend you connect with them, you know, every couple of months. If you're at visibility, but you want to get to credibility with somebody, you know, you connect with them periodically throughout the year. But touch points are important. It might be an email, it might be a phone call, it might be a Zoom call. It might be social media. You know, I love social media. People are surprised to hear the founder of BNI, this big face-to-face networking organization, talk about something like Facebook. But I love social media. I think it's a great way to stay connected with people. I wish I had Facebook when I was a student. You know, when I was a graduate student, I went to school with the deputy director of the Federal Aviation Administration in graduate school. The only way you could ever talk to him was on a phone call. You know, you tried to get through to the deputy director of the Federal Aviation Administration on a phone call. That doesn't happen. But if we were connected on social media, I mean, I'd still be in contact with him. This is absolute truth. I went to school with the captain of the palace guard for Saddam Hussein. He's probably not around anymore, but man, it would have been interesting to stay in touch with him. And there were other people that were just very interesting. So I think tools like social media are a great way to stay connected with people. So you reach out to them and you comment on their posts. You know, you maybe instant message them and say, yeah, how you doing? It's been a while since we talked. I hope things are going well with you. Just touch points, really important.
Would you say that the touch points specifically are different between the streams? So between like the strong contact stream and the online and the casual contact, is there?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. They are different. There's no question about it. I'm sitting there playing with this thing. There's no question they are different because you want to, you know, people that you're at profitability with, it's like you're able to get right to the point with them. You've got a relationship with them. And so it's very easy to get right to the issue at hand. You know, how'd that referral go for you? Let me tell you how that referral that you gave me went. You can get right to it. You can send them an email about a new product that you have, and they won't reply back and say, you're spamming me, because you have a relationship with them. On the other hand, if you send that email about a new product that you have with somebody that you're only have visibility with, they're going to go, hey, take me off this list. Who are you? Why? I don't want this. And so, yeah, you communicate completely differently with people based on where you are in that process.
Thank you. Okay, got one more. Actually, I've got 15 more. So we may be writing to you for some follow-up answers.
You write to me. I'm happy to take another one.
Your blog as well. Okay, the last question that we will be asking this evening is, what are some creative ways to follow up when a contact doesn't respond to outreach?
When a contact doesn't respond to what?
To outreach.
Outreach. Yeah. Well, look, if they're not responding to outreach, they don't want to talk to you. And it's possible that you might want to move on. You know, there's oftentimes, there are people in my organization, in BNI, where they say, you know, I've invited someone to BNI and they don't want to, they're not responding to me. And I tell them, yeah, let it go. Some will, some won't. So what? Who's next? And so I would recommend, if you got somebody who's not responding to you, if you push too hard, they'll never respond to you, ever. And you'll sour any potential relationship that there might be. So I've certainly been known to reach out to somebody a few times, but when you know, after 2 or 3 and they're not responding, the writing's on the wall. I'd recommend that you remember, you know, some will, some won't, so what?
That is going to be a memorable line. Some will, some won't, so what? All right, and so I believe Thalia had some closing words. So Thalia, let me know if you're able to get back in.
And by the way, let me thank you for inviting me. I love doing this. I love pouring into people on networking and on business. And it was truly my pleasure to be here tonight. And thank you.
We're so glad to have you. Thanks again.
Ivan, it was a great evening. Thank you for your words and your willingness to speak to us. I think it got better as we went on. Would you agree, Jane and James? Well, in closing, I just want to, on behalf of the Human Capital Management Club, eBoard, our faculty advisors, I would like to thank everyone for attending this evening. Dr. Misner, once again, thank you for your willingness to share your wealth of knowledge and networking. I'm sure we're going to get great feedback on this. To the Human Capital Management Program, faculty, our faculty advisors, as well as the interim director of the HCM program, Dr. Steve Safia, thank you for supporting the initiatives of the Human Capital Management Club. For everyone else, we ask that you keep an eye open for upcoming events. It's going to be a great year. In October, we'll be hosting a DEI event. Look out for our emails. Please follow us on social media, and we will be sending out a survey after this. Please give us some feedback. We want to know what we're doing well, what areas we could improve on, what are the topics you'd like to know. Remember, the HCM Club is your club, and we're here to really help build our network and to really work with each other to continue to build a great, not a good, a great HCM program. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any members of the eBoard, our faculty advisor, Sarah Daly, Solange Carias, and even the Human Capital Management Program. And once again, follow us on social media, get involved, and thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. That was fantastic.
Thanks, everybody.
Much appreciated.
Yeah, it's my flame. I love it.
You're
Stay
great.
in it.
You're great.
All right.
Burn bright.
Sorry for all the lights. Wasn't expecting that today. It was a very bright day here. Take care.
Enjoy the pour.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.